Good afternoon. Thank you for joining us. Up first, the story of a single dad making $75,000 a year who can't find an affordable place to rent. Carl Eaton makes too much money to qualify for BC housing, but he can't afford the market. We're asking, how do you feel about the state of rental housing in BC? And there was a real spike in wildfires over the weekend. At 12:30, the province will be giving an update with Bo and Ma. We'll bring that to you live. Plus, to close the show, it is summer birdwatching season. What birds and bird behavior have you noted in your area? We'll talk about bird spotting. I'm Michelle Eliot. This is BC Today. Welcome to the program. Good to have you with us on CBC Radio 1, live streaming as well on cbc.ca/BC, on CBC Gem, and on YouTube at the CBC Vancouver YouTube page. And we begin this afternoon with a story about the struggles of being a renter in BC. Carl Eaton is a single dad who lives with his 18-year-old son. They've been ordered to move out by multiple landlords in the past 2 years who wanted to sell the property or move relatives into the suite. Carl and his son are now, once again, on the move. They have until July 31st to find a new place to live. Now, Carl earns $75,000 a year. That's too much to qualify for assistance from BC Housing, but he says it's too little to afford a two-bedroom apartment on a single parent's income. And Carl says he has 3 weeks to figure something out, or they will both be homeless. He spoke to the CBC's Eva Yuguensench.
Your salary is too high to qualify for BC Housing, but not enough for you to find an affordable two-bedroom. What does that say to you about the kind of current situation that people like you are in Vancouver right now?
Yeah, it's not just me, it's thousands, right? It's untenable. Either the threshold has to change, or do we put a cap on rent? Is there anything we can do to that? I know they're trying to speed up permits and tear down these houses and build more because they're talking about density. But when you tear down these houses, what's going in their place? I don't see affordable housing going in there. I see luxury condos or boutique residences or things like that. So is that going to be rentable? Probably not, because if you look at mortgage and rates that are happening right now, those people that own those places are going to have to charge a lot. Inflation's high, everything's high, food's high, it's not coming down. And why isn't it coming down? All these questions, and they blame it on supply and demand, shortage of workers. Is that really the case, or is it a profitability greed situation we're in right now? Because I think that's more likely what it is, right?
You've lived in Vancouver since you were 4. You've been working since you were 16 at TELUS for 10 years.
18 at TELUS.
18 at TELUS, okay. Does it feel unfair, the situation you're in right now?
I think it's ridiculous. I should, be able to find a place to live. Comfortable and live comfortably and still be able to eat well, be able to put my son to school, pay for my car, pay for gas. Why can't I do that? I'm a fully functioning person. I had a heart attack and a triple bypass and I survived that, but I'm not going to be able to survive finding a place to live. How does that work? In this city that we're supposed to be is the beautiful place on earth. Well, it is. Can't I live here? Should I be forced out? How does that make sense?
You said something in the interview yesterday that stuck with me. You said, I have to be broken or homeless to get help. What did you mean by that?
So there's resources for all those kind of things. So I found out it's called 611, I believe it is, and it's a resource, provincial resources and federal resources. I explained my situation to her, and she clacks away on her keyboard, and she said, "I'm sorry, there's actually nothing for you. You're full-time working, and there's nothing for you. If you were, say, a refugee, we could find something for you. If you were, battered or abused, we can find something for you. If you were homeless, we can find something for you. If you had a drug addiction, we can find something for you. So when you're homeless, give us a call back and we'll see what we can do for you." And that's literally what she said to me on the phone.
That was Carl Eaton. He's a renter in Vancouver, and he was speaking to the CBC's Eva Yuguensench. Now, BC Premier David Eby has been speaking about this story, and he told the early edition last week on CBC Radio that Carl Eaton's situation is a reality for far too many British Columbians.
Well, there's a significant wait list for BC housing, and that's why we're building so much housing right now. That's why we have those 17,000 units under development. But it's not just BC housing. We're having to move up the chain because we put significant investments into addressing homelessness and people living in really dire poverty. But what we're seeing is the numbers of people who are homeless staying about the same, or even increasing in some communities despite a significant investment. And what's happening is people with reasonable reasonable incomes that should be able to find and historically have been able to find housing in the market aren't able to. So a lot of our new housing strategy focuses on middle income people, using public land to build that housing that's actually attainable for people to rent or to purchase.
That's BC Premier David Eby speaking to the early edition on CBC Radio 1. And we are talking about this story today because it's an issue that many people on those middle incomes that he mentioned are facing in our province. So we want to hear from you. How do you feel about the state of the rental market in your community? Do you have your own story about renting that you'd like to share? And what actions would you like to see from the governments on this? You can give us a call, 1-800-825-5950, 604-669-3733, star or pound 690 on your cell phone. You can send an email to bctoday@cbc.ca. I'm joined by two guests now. Carolina Ibarra is the CEO of the Pacifica Housing Advisory Association, and Tom Armstrong is the CEO of the Cooperative Housing Federation of BC. Good afternoon to you both.
Hi, Michelle.
Hi, thanks for having me.
Thank you for joining us. Carolina, to you first. What's your reaction to this story that we've just heard?
Yeah, unfortunately, it's something that we are seeing more and more, is a trend of individuals and families who earn a decent wage, who are struggling to either retain housing or access housing. And this is particularly exacerbated with families, as there's very little housing stock for families.
Those 2-bedroom units. And what about, Tom, for you? What do you take from Carl Eaton's story?
Well, what's really interesting is that Carl earns more than the median income in Vancouver. It's about $72,500, and at his salary, using the standard or the traditional measure of affordability, he should be able to afford rent in and around the area of $1,900 a month. But he's got a son. He's looking for a 2-bedroom apartment. The average 2-bedroom apartment in Vancouver rents for $3,500. So that's like almost double the level of affordability that would be appropriate for him. So Carl is caught in the squeeze of a really unprecedented crisis in supply and affordability, the likes of which we haven't seen in BC or Canada since the early 70s and 80s.
Why has it grown to that kind of crisis that you're talking about?
Well, we have a market that's not producing enough purpose-built rental housing. It's also a squeeze in the ownership market. For the first time in 50 years, we've seen the growth in renter households in BC has outpaced the growth of ownership households, because ownership is becoming so much more inaccessible that more people are moving into the rental market, and that's putting additional pressure on a market that already has historically low vacancy rates and historically high rents. Just census over census, 2016 to 2021, rents in BC increased 30%. That's the highest rate of increase in the country. And when so little of that stock is being built as non-market housing, and showing up really more as an asset class in somebody's investment portfolio than a home for someone like Carl, you've got all the classic indicators of a housing crisis, and we need to start responding as if it is a crisis.
And Carolina, you heard from the Premier there saying they need to, with policies, move up the chain and address those middle incomes that have not been addressed before. What supports are needed for that demographic?
That's a really good question. First of all, what happens when you don't support that demographic is that now you've got a group of people who earn good incomes, who can't access affordable purpose-built housing, and so they're moving into precarious housing, living, and homelessness. So we're broadening the cycle of homelessness in the way our system is working. Some of what is needed is obviously more supply. So there are steps being taken by the province and by municipalities. Actually, for the first time, I'm quite impressed with what municipalities are doing, many of them in their toolbox, such as financial exemptions and different things to accelerate building. So that's one piece. I do think that the federal government needs to think hard about interest rates in terms of allowing nonprofits and co-ops to build, because at this point we access preferential interest rates, but they are very similar to what is already out there, which is making it prohibitive to build. The second is, once those sites are built, we do need some financial tools to keep those affordable in the face of inflation. Property tax exemptions at the municipal level is one example, but also subsidies directed to family units. There are very few family units with subsidies, which means that a very, very broad range of people are competing for a very small pool of affordable family units, which is exacerbating the situation.
My guests are Carolina Ibarra, CEO of the Pacifica Housing Advisory Association, and Tom Armstrong, the CEO of the Cooperative Housing Federation of BC. And we're asking you, in light of this story about the single dad who makes $75,000 a year and cannot find an affordable place to rent. He has until July 31st right now. He makes too much to qualify for financing, for support from BC Housing, but also can't find an affordable place for him and his son. So we're asking you, how do you feel about the state of renting in BC? And do you have a story you'd like to share? Our numbers are 1-800-825-5950, 604-669-3733. On your cell phone, star or pound 690. Sheena is calling us on the line from Victoria. Hi, Sheena.
Hello. Hi. I started a petition on change.org to change the BC rental laws because, decades of really bad policies have allowed housing to become a cash cow for a wealthy few. I'm not talking about the person who has a one-bedroom suite to pay their mortgage. I'm talking about the REITs that have been allowed to buy, it being an investment rather than a human right, which is what it is. So the 3 points on my petition are: landlords should not be allowed to increase the rent to whatever they want between tenants. They should only be allowed to raise it once a year. And the notice needs to be 2 months, not 1 month, because nobody can find a place in 1 month. And thirdly, no more rent evictions. That's absolute nonsense. I'm not sure what the BC laws are, but you can only move in your children or parents. And if a group or anyone buys a building and it already meets the standards for it's legal, it meets the standards for safety, etc., then that's the building you've bought. You should not be allowed to turf people out, make cosmetic improvements so that you can charge unrealistic rent.
Okay.
Am I allowed to? So my petition is to the Minister of Housing, and here's my advice to people: for heaven's sake, email, call, and tell them that if they don't do something about it, you will not vote for them. That's what they listen to: money or votes.
Sheena, thank you very much for the call. A few points.
Am I allowed to give the petition what it is, the address?
Okay.
So go to change.org. Change BC rent laws, all lowercase, no caps, and please get politically active. Not just your vote, but use your voice all the time.
Sheena, thank you very much for the call. Carolina, she talked there about rent evictions, about limits on increasing rents. But let's talk about rent evictions, because the BC government has put in place some limits on landlords and rent evictions, and more new requirements to prove that they are needed.
Yes, the frustration is real, and rent evictions are a huge concern and part of this issue. But the root cause is that BC, and most of Canada, frankly, has primarily an aging housing stock. We have a housing stock that needs significant retrofits or to be redeveloped altogether. And that in itself is not a problem. The problem is that the programs aren't available to support the volume of retrofits that's required, and this is in the private sector as well as the nonprofit sector. There is a mechanism now that the provincial government put in place to support nonprofits in acquiring private sector sites so that they may be renovated and kept as community housing. But that only is a piece of it. Even in the nonprofit sector, there's a very broad range of buildings that need to be renovated. And in order to prevent this renoviction situation, we need support and participation from the federal government as well as the provincial government to be able to make these upgrades in a meaningful way that keeps the buildings affordable.
Okay, and so on the subject of renovictions themselves, in which tenants are given notice because the landlord says they have to do work, they now have to provide evidence that, is that right, that the onus is on them now to say this is the work that actually is urgent and needs to be done?
Yes, that is correct. The onus is on the landlord to prove that, and obviously in the private sector, their landlords are going to try and recover those that investment. But in the nonprofit sector as well, it's recovering the ability to make those upgrades. So there are programs that could be put in place, let's put it this way, accelerated and increase to support this happening without requiring increases to the tenant to be able to do them.
Okay. Thank you very much for the call, Sheena. Bonnie is on the line in Victoria as well. And Bonnie, you have a story you'd like to share.
Yes, thank you for taking my call. I have a couple of questions, and I certainly want to share my story. I'm just turned 60 years old. I am a nana of a 4-year-old. And my situation, I have always been a loyal tenant and go above and beyond to make the landlord's property even better. And I was evicted at the new year, December 29th, by my landlord, who took over, who does not live in Victoria, but lives in Metro Vancouver in a high-rise condo. He came to me with an eviction notice, which is the first time I've ever received one, which was shaky ground in the new year. And he gave me 3 alternatives. One, I could stay at my 1-bedroom, but he would raise the rent $1,000 more. That was from $905 to now $1,905.
Is that within the... Can I just ask, Bonnie, what was the reason that was given to you?
Because he claimed that his brother, who is part owner, is moving in, which was untrue. However, he gave me a third option, and that was a buyout. He paid me 12 months rent buyout for me to leave. Now that money talks. I'm on disability. That meant something for me. And thankfully, I did my due diligence right away, went online, and I happened to find a housekeeping room. I moved within 2 weeks into a housekeeping room. And now this has never been discussed as an alternate dwelling place.
Okay.
But it was very common back in the day in these Victorian homes.
And so
that there would be housekeeping units.
Okay.
And that's a shared bathroom.
Bonnie, if I can just jump in, I'm sorry to cut you off there, but basically you're saying that your landlord gave you notice of eviction because he said his brother was going to move in. You dispute that, and he also talked about increasing your rent to $1,000, but you were essentially offered a buyout, and so now you have moved out of the home?
Yes, I had. I had no, what am I going to do?
Okay.
Stay there?
Okay. What do you think is a solution then? I mean, what is your, how do you summarize your situation and what would be something the government could do on that?
Well, the government should look into housekeeping units.
Okay.
They've changed bachelor to studio.
Okay.
Well, there's no discussion of housekeeping units. Now, I share a bathroom with 7 other people.
7 other people. Okay. But it sounds like, is this a resolution in your mind that is feasible, or are you unhappy with it?
No, it turned out to be a magic carpet ride.
Okay.
You know, because I had suffered, I'm on disability now, but at one time I was living off of $880 a month, and my rent was $905.
Bonnie, thank you very much for the call. So essentially, at the end of the day, that is something that you are interested in, that you are satisfied with that, but it sounds like there was quite a dispute between you and your landlord at the outset. Thank you so much for the call. I mean, these are the sort of very complicated situations that landlords and tenants can find themselves in. Robin is up next in Penticton. Hi there, Robin.
Hi there.
Hi, what story of renting would you like to share?
I've been in Penticton about 13 years now, and I've constantly been either on my own or with roommates with my friends. But it's now fairly impossible for me to live on my own. It's just way too expensive, and barely able to live with my roommates as well. Mm-hmm.
What has that meant for you?
It's just loss of independence. I've been fairly lucky to be able to move in with friends, but slowly each of us have been getting married, and so if myself or my roommate get married, we literally are gonna have to find strangers to live with, which we don't really want to do. And it just means that we don't get to move into either a different place or just have to deal with noisy neighbors and things like that.
And Robin, it sounds like you're a young person. What impact does this have on young people who want to stay in Penticton then? I mean, we heard the story of Carl Eaton there. He was actually told, maybe you should move to another province because it's just so unaffordable here. What does this mean for you and your future in Penticton?
Yeah, it's really hard. I mean, I'm here from Alberta, and I love it here. And I mean, I'm a legal assistant, and so I make, okay wage and stuff. But it's hard to imagine trying to leave. And everyone kind of says that that's the easy option, but that's also fairly expensive. You have to rent vehicles to move your stuff. You have to pay the first month's rent. You have to do a deposit. You still have to find a job somewhere else that might have a pay cut or whatever, leave your friends, your family. So it's not as easy as just move to a different city or
Sure.
province.
Yeah. Well, Robin, thanks so much for sharing your story as well.
Yeah, thank you so much.
Good luck to you. That's Robin in Penticton. Let me wrap up with our two guests here just quickly. So, Carolina Barra, you talked about the need for the federal government to step in and provide more support. What about you, Tom Armstrong? What kinds of supports are needed right now to specifically deal with, someone like Robin, who's a legal assistant, and someone like Carl Eaton, who is making that income, that middle income, but still can't manage to find a place to put a roof over their head?
We need to dramatically increase the supply of non-market housing in BC. The scary thing about the situation that you're hearing about from your callers is that the government in BC is investing more in a very comprehensive housing strategy than any other government, including the federal government on a per capita basis in Canada. And we're still seeing runaway rents. 30% increases over 4 years, more than 100,000 households paying more than 50% of their income on rent. This is crisis level spending. People are just one bad break away from being homeless. So the rental market is broken. There does need to be a dramatic expansion of the supply of purpose-built and non-market rental housing, and it's going to take all 3 levels of government. Every level of government has slightly a different set of tools in the toolkit. They all need to come together, coordinate their efforts, massively increase the investment in non-market or affordable housing, and we have a lot of work to do. We've got a 20-year hole we've dug for ourselves here, and
Okay.
it's going to take some time
Let me
to have the impact we need to see.
Let me just quickly ask Carolina here. One of the issues that Carl Eaton raises is the threshold for qualifying for those kinds of programs, for BC housing programs. He just is above that limit. Should that be revisited?
Yes, I understand why we have parameters around who qualifies for what. We want to make sure that people who really need it are getting access to the affordability that they need in housing. However, we need to let go of preconceptions of who it is that is in need today. With cost escalations going up the way they have, and the situation changing consistently, we need programs and we need an approach that is adaptable and flexible, understanding that the profile of people who need access to supports and affordable housing is changing, and we need to be able to respond to that as it happens.
Okay, thank you very much, both of you, for your time this afternoon. Very good to have you.
Pleasure.
Thank you so much.
Carolina Ibarra is the CEO of the Pacifica Housing Advisory Association. Tom Armstrong is the CEO of the Cooperative Housing Federation of BC. Now, in a few moments, we'll take you live to a news conference with Emergency Preparedness Minister Bowen Ma talking about wildfires and the drought situation in BC. Right now, here's a CBC News update with Robert Zimmerman.
Good afternoon. The two sides in the strike that has shut down BC ports resumed bargaining over the weekend, but neither side is saying if or when more talks are planned. About 7,400 members of the International Longshore and Warehouse Union walked off the job July 1st. Police have released few details about the Lower Mainland's latest deadly shooting. A man was shot and killed inside his vehicle yesterday in Surrey. Investigators believe he was targeted but didn't say why. A short time later, a vehicle was found on fire nearby. And thousands of lightning strikes on the weekend sparked dozens of new wildfires around BC. 2 areas in the Cariboo Regional District are under evacuation orders. There are now more than 300 active fires, with 200 considered out of control. And now the forecast. Environment Canada has issued heat and severe thunderstorm warnings for several sections of the south and central interior. On the north coast, mainly cloudy this afternoon with a high of 15. Highs reaching 27 with some smoke and a chance of thunderstorms in the Peace. In the central interior, showers, smoke and some sunshine with a high of 28. Highs getting close to 30 with a chance of showers and thunderstorms in the Kootenays and Okanagan. And for Metro Vancouver, Greater Victoria and the Fraser Valley, lots of sunshine this afternoon. Windy in some areas with highs in the mid-20s. I'll have more local news at the top of the hour. Now back to Michelle with BC Today.
Rob, thank you very much. That's Robert Zimmerman in the CBC Vancouver newsroom. You heard him mention the dozens of lightning strikes and more than 300 fires around British Columbia, and 98 of them sparking in just over a day yesterday. Let's go live now to Emergency Preparedness Minister Bowen Ma.
Alerts came into effect over the weekend, primarily impacting communities in the Northeast, Prince George, and Cariboo fire centers. Approximately 156 people are under an evacuation order due to wildfires, and approximately 629 people are under an evacuation alert. Yesterday, a tactical evacuation was undertaken in the Stikine region to help people evacuate quickly and safely due to the Little Blue River wildfire. The Stikine region is unincorporated. In fact, it is the only region in our province that is unincorporated. Therefore, the province is responsible for implementing the evacuation order. In order to bring in the order, the province has had to declare a state of emergency for the region. Earlier today, I declared a state of emergency for the Stikine region effective immediately. While the state of emergency is regional, we are continuously assessing the situation across the province closely. We will not hesitate to take action to keep people and communities safe, and will provide updates as the situation evolves. While a provincial state of emergency will not provide us with more resources to fight the fires, as those powers already exist within the Wildfire Act, it may support our provincial emergency response and would allow us to use additional tools under the Emergency Program Act. This includes issuing evacuation orders, as we have done today. This can also include securing supply chains and the flow of emergency supplies. To date, this season, we have not needed these powers province-wide, but we will continue to ensure that we have all of the tools available at our disposal to support people and communities. We want to recognize the BC Wildfire Service and emergency management teams who are working around the clock to suppress fires, support communities, and share up-to-date information with the public. Our dedicated wildfire service and emergency management personnel are working tirelessly to ensure your safety and well-being. Under the Wildfire Act, the province has access to all the tools needed to coordinate provincial and international resources to suppress wildfires. International personnel from Mexico and the United States are currently deployed to the Prince George Fire Center, and the province has contracted additional aviation resources in recent days. BC continues to coordinate additional out-of-province resources through the Canadian Interagency Forest Fire Center, but everyone has a part to play in preparedness. Fire smart your home, clean your gutter, mow your lawn, and make sure anything combustible, such as wood piles, are stored at least 10 meters away from your house. There are many great tips in the Fire Smart Homeowner's Guide available through the Fire Smart BC website. It is also important that people are aware of and follow fire bans and prohibitions in their area. Today, we are also announcing additional campfire restrictions. Effective today at 3:00 p.m., Category 1 campfires will be prohibited in all areas of the province, with the exception of Haida Gwaii. I'll say that again. Effective today at 3:00 p.m., Category 1 campfires will be prohibited in all areas of the province, with the exception of Haida Gwaii. I urge everyone to do their part. Human-caused wildfires are completely preventable and divert critical resources away from lightning-caused fires. You can learn more about fire bans on the BC Wildfire Service app or website. You can also report a wildfire using the app or calling *5555 from a cell phone. Quick reporting by people has already been a big help to wildfire crews this season. Give me a second. Thank you. If your community is placed under an evacuation order, you must evacuate the area immediately. Your local government or First Nation will provide information on evacuation routes and evacuation reception centers. Emergency support services is readily available to lend a helping hand to those who have been evacuated and who need assistance. People must register and attend an evacuation reception center to access these services, which encompass everything from providing accommodation, food, and transportation to taking care of other essential needs that you may have. It is now possible for people to pre-register with emergency support services online using the evacuee registration and assistance tool. You can do that from anywhere in the province. Please visit ess.gov.bc.ca to register. Whether you live near an active wildfire or not, I encourage every British Columbian to take 20 minutes out of your day to put together an emergency plan, including packing a grab-and-go bag. By keeping a grab-and-go bag in your home and vehicle stocked with plenty of water, you're giving yourself another layer of preparedness in case there is an unexpected event. PreparedBC.ca has excellent resources available in multiple languages to get you started. In addition to wildfires, many areas of our province are already being affected by drought. Drought can impact people and communities in different ways, including agriculture, health, economic, and environmental consequences. With the implementation of the BC Drought and Water Scarcity Response Plan, area-specific...
You're listening to BC's Emergency Preparedness and Climate Readiness Minister Bowen Ma giving an update on wildfires and the wildfire situation in the province. As you heard there, 156 people approximately are on evacuation order, and a local state of emergency has been declared effective immediately for the Stikine region. That is a regional state of emergency, but the minister says they are monitoring conditions across the province to see whether provincial state of emergency would be needed when it comes to this, but not yet. Personnel from Mexico and the U.S. are currently deployed to the Prince George Fire Center, and as well, she announced they're effective at 3 p.m. today. Additional campfire restrictions as well. Category 1 campfires will be prohibited in all areas of the province, with the exception of Haida Gwaii, and that's effective at 3 o'clock today. And as you've been hearing in the news, yesterday, the BC Wildfire Service reported 98 new fires in just one day, and that brings the number to 300 around the province. We'll continue to monitor this story and wildfire updates for you here on CBC. You can always check our website, cbc.ca/BC. You can get the latest on CBC Radio 1, and of course tonight on the CBC News at 6. This is BC Today here on CBC. You can catch us live online, cbc.ca/BC. You can also watch us on CBC Vancouver's YouTube page and use the CBC Gem app. As well, of course, we are on CBC Radio 1. That's 88.1 FM in Vancouver. And it is now summer bird watching season. To close the show, we're going to bring you something a little bit more fun. We'll talk to you about bird watching, and it is now the baby bird season. A lot of baby birds are fledgling their nests, and so there's some very interesting bird behavior going on right now out there. So we're asking you, what birds have you spotted in your area recently? And what bird behavior have you seen and want to know about? You can give us a call, 1-800-825-5950, 604-669-3733 on your cell phone, star or pound 690. You can also email us your stories and a photo too, if you have it. We can post a photo right to our live stream for all to see. And that email is bctoday@cbc.ca. And take a look at this photo right now. It's a photo of 2 rock pigeons bursting with gray and green. Look at that, purple iridescent feathers. Now, this was taken in White Rock, and the 2023 grand prize winner at the Audubon Photography Awards. Beautiful. And this photo of the northern hawk owl, taken in the Thompson-Nicola region, won a professional honorable mention. They were taken by nature photographer Leron Gertzman, and he joins me now to take your calls about bird watching and bird photography. Hi, Leron. Congratulations.
Hi, Michelle. Thank you so much.
Very nice to speak with you. Tell us more about these photos and how they came to be.
Yeah, so it was pretty cool to have, some local British Columbia birds featured in this year's Audubon Photography Awards. And the grand prize winner there does feature a very common kind of city bird, the rock pigeon, that bird that you go for a walk in the streets and you see perching all over the place. Yeah. And I wanted to kind of capture these birds in a way that was a little bit different. And I hadn't gone out that morning with the intention of capturing rock pigeons, but I saw this pair perched up on a little wooden post, and the backdrop behind them was actually the underside of the White Rock Pier. It was really dark and shadowy. So by positioning myself in the right spot, I was able to get this beautiful black background, and the light was hitting them in a way that beautifully showcased their iridescent feathers as these two birds were allopreening as they were grooming each other.
Okay, so that's what they were doing there, because one of them is kind of snuggled up against the other.
Yeah, it's this behavior called allopreening.
What does that mean?
So it's when birds basically take time to groom each other's feathers, often in a somewhat affectionate way. And I do find that, when you approach photography of wildlife from a scientific perspective, I have a science background. I studied biology at the University of British Columbia. And, we often kind of avoid trying to put emotions onto wildlife from a scientific perspective. But as a nature photographer, I'd be lying if it wasn't something that I feel like I see quite a bit, kind of emotional moments and tenderness between individuals.
Wow. And you said you actually didn't head out thinking you would be taking a photo of some rock pigeons.
No, I didn't. It was kind of a surprise photo. I just saw this opportunity arise and wanted to capture it. And I think that does speak towards the fact that there is beautiful nature accessible to us, especially with birds, in the middle of very urban environments where you wouldn't think that you could encounter beautiful birds and have incredible photo opportunities. But if you take the time to explore and search your local area, there's some amazing things to be found to observe and to photograph.
And Liron, why is nature photography so important to you?
Well, I do think that growing up in this part of the world in British Columbia, just the natural world is something I've been exposed to a lot. We're located on the Pacific Flyway, a bird migration superhighway. But I think that photography specifically is a super powerful tool because it allows me to capture what I'm so fortunate to witness based in this part of the world and share that with a larger audience. And in doing that, I hope to kind of, showcase how amazing birds are and how amazing nature is and how worth protecting, and in some cases in need of protecting, these animals are.
Okay, our number is 1-800-825-5950, 604-669-3733. It is summer bird spotting season. We're asking you, what are you seeing out there? And what is the bird behavior that you're noticing too? What do you want to ask Liron Gertzman about? Again, 1-800-825-5950, 604-669-3733. And tell us more, Liron, about the behavior that is happening right now, because it's summer baby bird nesting season.
Yeah, it's a really interesting time of year because this is the time when a lot of birds that are either resident birds or migratory birds that are here for the nesting season, they are raising their young, and those young are fledging the nests. So if you're walking out in green spaces, anywhere where you've got birds that might be nesting, I really encourage you to listen for kind of persistent, repetitive, often high-pitched sounds coming from the shrubbery. And those are begging calls that young birds make. After they fledge the nest, they actually often rely on their parents for food for a little bit longer. So you can kind of pay attention to those begging sounds, and that will often lead you to some baby birds.
And what are the birds people can see right now then?
So right now, pretty much all of our local breeders are fledging the nests. Birds like great blue herons, there's lots of young eagles leaving the nests, lots of songbirds. Just the other day, I actually saw something kind of unique. I saw a brown-headed cowbird being fed by a yellow warbler. And the brown-headed cowbird is a nest parasite that actually lays its eggs in the nests of other birds instead of raising them on their own. So this brown-headed cowbird would have laid its egg in a yellow warbler nest, and the yellow warbler was feeding that brown-headed cowbird like its own chick.
Oh, wow. Okay. And did you get a photo of that?
I did get a photo of it. Yeah, it was pretty cool to see.
Of course you did. And how do you choose and determine where you go in the first place?
Yeah, so it depends what you're going to look for. So at this time of year with a lot of nesting birds, kind of anywhere you got forest and greenery is a great place to look for nesting songbirds. The more coastal areas, however, there is something else going on right now, which is the very, very start of the shorebird migration. So even though it still just feels like summer is just beginning, for birds that have nested high in the Arctic, especially like sandpipers and plovers and other migratory shorebirds, they're actually already making their way south. So these birds have huge migrations that take them thousands of kilometers up and down the Pacific coast. They breed in the high Arctic, and some of them head all the way down to Central and South America for the non-breeding season. And here in British Columbia, we're on this migratory route, the Pacific Flyway, and we have so many critical stopover sites for these birds. And July is kind of the start of that shorebird migration season. So in addition to the nesting activity and the baby birds that you see out in the parks right now, there's also a beginning push of the southbound migration.
Okay, let's take a call right now as we talk about summer bird spotting. And Trace is on the line in Vancouver. Hi, Trace, do you have a question?
Oh, hello. I'm listening to in Stanley Park, lots of Swainson's thrush. They have a beautiful rising crescendo song, but I don't see them. And I was just wondering also about when they nest and when they're having their young.
Yeah, so Swainson's thrushes are beautiful, beautiful songsters. They have an amazing song. That's actually one of my favorite songs, maybe my favorite that you hear in the forest at this time of year. But like you said, they are really, really elusive. They are kind of brown. They stick low in the understory of the forest. And what we hear is that song. It's actually like polyphonic. It has many notes in it all at once. And this is the time when they're nesting and the youngs are coming out of the nest. So I would say walk around as many trails as you can, look for little bits of movement in the foliage. And if you're lucky, you might get a glimpse, but usually it's just a glimpse because those are elusive birds.
They're fast moving, eh?
Yes, they move around in that understory quickly as they feed.
Trace, anything else you want to ask?
I just mentioned the varied thrush, which is another, has an interesting song.
Yeah, the varied thrush is another one of my favorites. And those ones around, you tend to have a little bit in the, at least on the coast here, in the higher elevation forests. And they have a beautiful whistle as well that has more than one note in it at once. So this family, the thrushes, is famous for their absolutely incredible songs and their ability to produce multiple notes and like chords at the same time.
Trace, thank you very much for the call. And Jean is up next in Clearwater now with a question about bird behavior. Hi, Jean.
Good morning. Good afternoon. I wanted to ask your authority here about some crow behavior. Crows, you often hear them called, but 3 or 4 days ago, the crow's behavior was extreme. They were flying back and forth and very close to my house, from tree to tree, back and forth and making a huge amount of noise. And it went on, it seemed to me, all day, and then again the next day.
Oh, that must have been fun to listen to.
Now it has stopped. And I think it's something to do with the fledglings, but I can't imagine what it's about, really.
Okay. Relentless, it sounds like.
Relentless.
Yeah, thanks for sharing that. Yeah, crows are fascinating. They're highly intelligent birds. So they display a lot more complex behaviors than many other bird species. It sounds like there's possibly a couple things going on here. One potential thing that may have been happening is there was possibly something that they perceived as a threat in the area. Crows can be very aggressive and towards potential predators. That could be a raccoon, that could be an owl, could be a hawk, could be an eagle. And they will often kind of not let up, and they'll be alarming and cawing and staying in the area until this predator leaves. Also, it's possible if these were younger crows that you were hearing, it's possible that you had some baby crows around making a lot of noise as they were begging for food. But if there were lots of crows together and there were kind of larger groups of them, then perhaps there was a predator around there that they were trying to drive away.
Yeah, I did wonder about that, but I couldn't. I went outside and walked around and, sort of couldn't see anything. But it was definitely the adults that were making all the racket.
Okay, yeah. So maybe a predator hiding very well. Sometimes when I see this behavior, it's one of the best ways that I've been able to find owls, for example, is just cluing into the crows. But sometimes I'll see it and I just won't be able to figure out what they're doing. And to me, that's also, a real fun part about watching birds is that especially animals like crows are very intelligent. They have very complex behaviors. And sometimes I can't exactly figure out what they're up to.
Yes, I agree with you. They're very intelligent. I don't know if you have time for me to tell a very short story about crows. When I was a child in Ontario, we lived in Peterborough, and there was a fellow there who owned the Peterborough Canoe Company, and he had a pet crow, which was a real nuisance. People didn't like it, but because of his position in the community, they didn't do anything about it, and he used to try and take the barrettes out of our hair as we walked around. But in any case, one thing that this crow did was to go fly into an open window in the elementary school in the summertime and take every single inkwell, those were glass inkwells if you anybody old enough to remember, and drop it on the floor.
Oh,
and
no.
He did it for everyone in that room. Yeah, somebody had just left a window open when they left for the summer, sort of, and that was what the crow did.
Oh, boy. Jean, you're right. They are very intelligent. Thank you so much for the call. That's Jean calling us from Clearwater. Any advice for people heading out, Liron?
Yeah, I would say a real pointer for birding at this time of year is to use your ears. And this does apply at all times of year. But a lot of us who are out there in the field all the time, we kind of find like 90% of the birds that we encounter, we can hear before we see them, especially in the forest. area. But if you're heading out to a more coastal area, an estuary where you've got mudflats, where we might be encountering some of that early migration, the advice I have for you is to pay attention to the tides, because if you're there when the tide's too low, everything might be really far away and it will be hard to observe the birds. If you're there when the tide's too high, there might be no shoreline for the birds to feed. So I like to go often on like a rising tide when you can watch the birds as they come closer and closer into the shore, feeding on the mudflats as they're uncovered by the tides each day.
Liron, thank you so much. Congratulations again.
Thank you again for having me, Michelle.
Happy birding to you. That's Liron Gertzman, award-winning nature photographer. This is BC Today here on CBC, and we have been bringing you live as well the news conference with Emergency Preparedness and Climate Readiness Minister Bowen Ma, speaking to the wildfire situation in BC. Let's go back live now. She takes questions from reporters.
For provincial safety and ensuring that we don't have another fire that gets large and is quite impactful to the province, is we have to continue to keep some resources within each of the centers for what we call preparedness, in particular because we know lightning is coming. I did reference earlier in an answer that we have put in a significant order to the Canadian Interagency Forest Fire Center somewhere, and we'll get the accurate number out once we get confirmation, but we have asked for somewhere in the neighborhood of 400 additional resources. We're also working with our partners in Montana, California, through the Northwest Compact to try to secure additional resources, not just for the next 5 days, but really looking at it through the lens of the next 2 months, 2.5 months, July, August, and September, which ties into the fatigue and the question around how our staff are doing. We need to make sure that we continue to see resources coming into the province, resetting our own resources to actively go and respond to wildfires. So we have mobilized resources up to the north over the weekend. We continued to push resources from the southern centers up to the northern centers, in particular into that regional district of Bulkley and Chaco area, which has got a significant amount of fires on the landscape. Some adjacent to communities or in the vicinity of communities. So we have attempted to mobilize and prioritize resources heading to that area. And today we're working really closely with some of the industry partners in that regional district of Bulkley and Chaco to see whether they have additional resource capacity to support our effort in the form of heavy equipment and some of the camp infrastructure that they have in place in that area right now. So we're continuing to ask and continuing to see some support from our national and international partners. But we are looking at fires with a really close lens around what are the potential impacts of those fires. But we will respond to every fire one way or another. It's really when the fires, if they can escape our initial response when we get report of a fire, which generally is coming from the public right now. I'd like to thank the public for that. We will send a response. It's really once the fires, if they escape our initial response, when we start to see that critical resource shortage.
You've been listening to Cliff Chapman with the BC Wildfire Service. We'll bring you the latest on CBC Radio, CBC Television, and cbc.ca/BC. I'm Michelle Eliot. Thanks for listening. Have a great afternoon.